Before we start reading today, let's go over the last three chapters that we have read so far. Make sure that you have a pen ready. We'll be looking at chapters 8 to 10. In chapter 8, we learn a bit more about David and Laurie. We know that since 10th grade, David has been going out of his way each morning to pick up Laurie from her house so that they can walk together into school. And this particular morning, David arrives at Laurie's house and he's full of excited energy as he tells her all about how he brought the wave to his football team. Laurie still expresses her doubts. Remember, she hasn't been the biggest fan of the wave from the beginning. And her main doubt is that the wave could actually transform the football team. She mentions to David that her mother thinks the whole wave movement sounds like brainwashing. And David tells Laurie that her mother is a crazy worrywart who couldn't possibly understand what the wave is really about. Laurie feels the urge to argue with David, but she obviously holds herself back as she doesn't want to get into a fight. When Ben Ross's students arrive in his history classroom, things are a bit different. They find that he has put up a large poster with the blue wave symbol on it at the back of his classroom. Ross silently moves up and down the aisles and he passes around small cards. And here was where Laurie realizes what they are, and these are wave membership cards. Mr. Ross explains that some students will notice a red X on the back of their cards, and these students will be known as monitors. And they are asked with reporting directly to Mr. Ross any members of the wave who do not obey to these rules. So that's quite similar to what we saw or we know from history with Nazi Germany with the Gestapo and the secret police. Ross then returns to the blackboard and he writes a third section of the wave's motto, strength through action. And discipline and community explains are meaningless without action. He encourages the students to behave like a well-oiled machine, and they need to support each other through the whole process of the wave. The students one by one rise and stand at attention next to their desks. Laurie does join them, but we know that she feels that something's quite off, and she also describes it as creepy about how her classmates are behaving. We see quite a few themes here. We know that if you look at, for example, in the beginning, the passage shows how the wave, though still in its early days, is already threatening to come between Laurie and David, and they are at ideological odd ends when it comes to the wave. David shows his classic ability of groupthink, where Laurie dismisses groupthink. Ben is excited about his students' demonstration of the initiative of what happens with the wave, decides to reward them by taking the experiment one step further. And that's the whole idea about responsibility with education. Ross wants his students to spread the wave through the school and usher the experiment into a new phase. But obviously as the wave moves beyond Ross's classroom, this is where Laurie's reservations start to multiply. So the whole idea of forcing and convincing people of new ideas. What's also important is that they meet or during their lunch, and at this lunch all of the wave members sit together at a long table. Brian, Brad, Amy, Laurie and David, and even Robert Billings joins them. David welcomes Robert quite warmly. Laurie then asks if anyone else is feeling weird about the experiment that has taken place in the history classroom, but the others all say that they're just excited about the different school and how different things are. Brad is grateful for the dissolution of the cliques. So yeah, once again we see the breakup of cliques, and we see this uniformity that is created, which is tied in nicely with the theme. Everyone, he says, is equal, and Laurie says she's not sure about how she feels about that. Brian flashes his membership card, revealing that he is a monitor, and jokingly threatens to report Laurie. David says that Laurie isn't breaking any rules, but Robert speaks up and says that she would be if she was truly in her heart against the wave. Laurie then is about to argue with Robert, but realizes that in doing so, she'd undermine the sense of community that the wave has created. Brad claps Robert on the back and tells him he's glad Robert has joined their table. He then jokingly asks if Brad has stuck another kick me sign on his back. So they're still reminiscence from the past that come through here. Okay. Also, tying up to the theme, Laurie doesn't want to rock the boat or appear to be against her other classmates. Okay, so breaking out from the mold. She also feels a lot of empathy for Robert and wants him to enjoy his newfound sense of belonging. Laurie is willing to go along with the wave in order to keep things nice and simple and obviously stick with her friend group. Okay, obviously that's for now at least. Okay, chapter 9 is a bit of a shorter chapter. As the wave begins now to spread and goes across the walls of Ben Ross's history classroom, okay, Ross then starts to become unsure of what to make of his experiment. Okay, because students from the other classes are now starting to join the wave, and even sitting in on Ross's history class. Okay, but despite the larger class size, the students are actually covering material quickly and efficiently. Everyone is well prepared for class each day, but Ross is slightly worried by the automatic unthinking answers. Okay, so he's not really getting the answers he would like, individual answers. Okay, it's very automatic, almost robotic. Okay, so he describes it as unthinking answers. Even though the students are doing their homework more often, their answers are short and rote, and they have no personality or thoughtfulness in what they're producing. As Ross asks some of his students what they like most about the wave, he is pleased to hear that the experiment has essentially erased social cliques and helped the students feel like they were all equal. He dreams of the possibilities the wave could create. He even envisions an article about himself in the Time magazine lauding him for his advancements in education. Okay, during a staff meeting of the Grapevine in the local or the school's newspaper, Laurie tells her writers that there are not enough stories for the upcoming issue, which is due out this week. Laurie then urges her staff to come up with some more ideas for stories, and this is where Carl then suggests writing about the wave, okay, which is obviously the biggest story that's happening in the school at the moment. Laurie is nervous about writing about the wave. She thinks of doing so it gives like a creepy feeling. Nevertheless, she urges her student reporter to gather as much information as they can about the wave and find out what Gordon students are really saying about this experiment. Then at night, Laurie is doing her homework in her room, and her mother comes in to talk to her, okay, Mrs. Saunders. She sits on Laurie's bed and tells her that she ran into Robert Billings' mother at the supermarket earlier and was surprised to hear that Robert has been transformed by this wave. So there's a positivity that comes out of it. Mrs. Saunders says she doesn't trust something that could create such a drastic change and admits she's worried about what's happening with the wave. Okay, she says it sounds a bit like a cult. Laurie says she's feeling more and more skeptical about the wave, but believes it's just a fad, okay, something that will pass. Mrs. Saunders also points out that she heard there is a wave rally before the upcoming football game, and that obviously has bad connotations with the word rally. Okay, where at which 200 new wave members will be formally indoctrinated. Laurie urges her mother not to be too paranoid. The wave is just a game, and Mr. Ross is a good teacher who would never let his students get out of hand. Okay, yeah, Laurie also admits that she doesn't know why her closest friends like David and Amy would actually get swept up in something, and she describes it as immature. Okay, but begs her mother not to blow things out of proportion. And as Mrs. Saunders leaves her room, however, Laurie wonders if the wave is really just a fad. Okay, and once again, here we see the themes come through. Okay, Ben Ross, okay, time and time again, okay, he nudges aside his personal fears and misgivings about the experiment, okay, by imagining the individual glory and success he stands to achieve. Okay, so he prioritizes himself over his students' well-being in these moments. Another point you can add to one of the themes is Laurie is testing the waters with regard to speaking out publicly against the wave. So the idea of unity being broken, community being broken. She doesn't yet know what the movement really is, only that it rubs her against the wrong way. So she has this creepy feeling about it. Okay. Laurie isn't ready to take a stand yet, but this passage does show, or this chapter does show, that she and several other Gordon High students haven't renounced their capacity for individuality. Okay, meaning critical thought as well. Okay, this chapter also again deals with how susceptible outsiders like Robert and Billings and others are to movements that flatten individuality and focus on the group. So obviously there's always a few that will benefit from it. Robert feels accepted for the first time, okay, but the sense of happiness he feels is an illusion. Okay, remember the circumstances that have allowed him to be included are actually false. Okay, probably even dangerous. Laura's misgivings about the wave increase seemingly by the hour, meaning she gets more and more worried. She doesn't trust this. Her worried mother's opinions meant less to her just a couple of days ago, but now as she sees this effect of the wave happening, she realizes that her mother actually might have a point and that these fears are actually valid. Okay, so it's important, once again, to have a look at how these themes come into play in each chapter. Okay, then in chapter 10, okay, at the start we know that Principal Owens wants to see Ben, which is obviously always a bit of a worry. Okay, Ben Ross is summoned to a meeting in Principal Owens' office. Okay, on the way down, okay, obviously he hears all the students giving him the wave salute, or sorry, not hears, he sees them giving him the wave salute, and Ross is nervous that Owens will urge him to stop the wave. Okay, but obviously this is an experiment that he's quite proud of. But he also admits that if that's what happens in the meeting, he'll feel some relief, okay, because there is some worry that this experiment will get out of control. He can't believe how big the wave has gotten in such a short span of time. And even though students like Robert Billings have been positively impacted by the wave, Ross is nervous about his own involvement in the experiment. Okay, he's worried about getting too carried away. In the meeting with is described as towering and formidable, Principal Owens. Owens asks Ross to obviously tell him a bit more about this experiment, which obviously has the whole school captured. He says in a tizzy. Ross explains the wave to Owens, who regards the experiment as unusual. Ross does assure Mr. Owens, or Principal Owens, that there have been no complaints, but Owens remains uncertain about the wave's use of mottos and salutes. Still Owens admits that even Coach Schiller has credited the wave with turning the football team's attitudes around. Owens also reminds Ross that there are limits to what happens in the classroom in terms of experiments, and Ross assures Owens that he won't let the wave go too far out of control. Owens tells Ross to be careful, because obviously the students are young and impressionable, but says that because Ross has never given Owens a reason to doubt him before, he may go ahead and continue with the wave. Once again, we have a look at our themes that take place here. Ross is getting nervous about the wave, and though he doesn't really want it to be reprimanded by his boss, there is some sort of relief, as the wave is starting to change the atmosphere of the school. This chapter also shows that Owens is willing to risk some controversy for the success of the struggling football team. He knows that Ross's methods are unconventional, bringing an idea of the responsibility of education. Owens does stay or remain a bit skeptical and gives Ross a clear, fair warning about how fragile and susceptible young minds are. Remember, as we read along in each chapter, to keep a record or just to identify the different themes that are found. So remember history and the past, equality versus independence, the responsibility of education, and then also that of groupthink and coercion. So make sure that you understand those four themes really well and that you start to identify them as we read along. So you've read up until chapter 8 now. So today you're going to then read chapter 9 and 10, and then you're going to answer the questions on the Google slide attached to today's assignment. Also, please make sure that you are constantly marking the questions as I load the memos up, and that you stay up to date with those answers that you mark. So actually go make some corrections and see how detailed your answers actually should be. Unfortunately, at the moment, our answers are very simplistic, so please try and answer in full and explain fully so that you have a good understanding of how the novel unfolds.